Now, when I was little, I was riding my bicycle around my home there on the farm, and I kept going over jumps and doing different kinds of things. And, well, at some point, I guess I must have been wearing jeans that were a little too baggy or maybe a little bit too long, but at some point my jeans got stuck in the front sprocket. Who else has ever had that happen to them? Right? Like, that is the most frustrating thing in the world. And now I kind of know how to handle it. It's not that hard, actually, to get it out. But at that point, I didn't know. My jeans were stuck. My bike wouldn't move. I couldn't get off of the thing. And when I finally did, I didn't know how to get anywhere. And, well, I decided I'm just going to have to try to go home and try to find my dad, and maybe he could help me out. The problem was I was quite a long ways from home. It wasn't like a mile or anything like that, but it was across our yard. Our yard was 10 acres or something like that. I was a long ways away from home. And I was down in behind my trees or in behind our shelter belt because we had these rows of trees to guard us from the wind. I grew up in southern Alberta after all. And down those rows, of course, were some jumps and bumps, and that's where I was, and that's where I got stranded. So I started to haul my bike and the thing. I tried to get off of it this way, and then I was hauling my bike and walking the way, and I was getting more and more frustrated, and I was yelling and hollering for someone to come and help me, but my parents apparently couldn't hear me. I think we had friends over at the time. Anyway, maybe that's why I went out for a bicycle ride, to get away from all the people that were there. And at one point, I literally sat down, and if I didn't start crying, I sure felt like it. It was just so difficult. It was so hard. I couldn't get these stupid things out. They were some of my favorite jeans, so I didn't want to wreck them. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to solve this problem. And I distinctly remember, that's like 30 some years ago, probably. I distinctly remember realizing and thinking, all right, if I want this problem solved, I'm going to have to get up and make my way to Dad. I had learned right there in that moment that sometimes there's things you just have to do. And I remember that moment, and I think back on that moment often. I remember when I had to shovel out the bunks full of snow. We'd have a spring snowstorm, and they would get full, like 1.5 foot of this wet, heavy snow. You know, the kind of snow that you dig and you pick it up and it looks blue from all of the moisture that's in it. Well, I had to clean out all of the bunks in our feedlot before the guy would come along and dump the feed in the bunks, because if he didn't, well, the cows wouldn't be able to eat it and it would get moldy and all kinds of things would happen. So I had to go around and clean out all of these bunks. And I just remember there was like miles of bunks. And I remember thinking, I don't want to, I can't, I'm going to be too tired, this isn't going to work for me. But at some point, I stood and I leaned on my shovel and I said, you know what? I can complain all I want, but this has to get done. I'm just going to have to endure it. And so I did. I got those things done. And there are other moments when I was cleaning our driveway in PEI after the 5th snowstorm that left a foot on our driveway and buried my car the 4th time over. Like, it was just, there were moments, and there's moments in our lives when we just have to endure. We just have to kind of pick ourselves up, or say something to ourselves, or look forward to something. And I remember shoveling, I was looking forward to a good warm cup of coffee afterwards when I was done, and I could strip off all of the clothes that had gotten me all wet and hot as well, but then I could sit down with a nice cup of coffee. In the winter, I could let the snow melt out of my beard, and then I could enjoy that cup of coffee while looking at a clean driveway or empty bunks full of food. But there are moments in our lives when I think life kind of feels like that. Life just feels like it's something to endure. There might be a season in our life when we go through various kinds of treatments. We go through a surgery, let's say, and the surgery is so painful, and we don't want to go through that pain anymore, but there's nothing we can do about it. All we have to do is just endure and go by the promise of our doctors and others, and from God and from those who are around us, that this will pass. This too shall pass. It won't last forever. We just have to endure this. For some of us, it's here now in this COVID time when there's all kinds of little decisions that we have to make. And now when we have to figure out what we're going to be doing for school in the fall, and there's all kinds of decisions and things that we have to weigh around that. And maybe if you're a child and you're thinking about going back to school and you don't know what this is going to look like, you don't know if your friends are going to be staying home and more of them are going to be homeschooling than before. You don't know if you're going to have to wear a mask or how much you're going to have to wear the mask. We are going to have to wear masks, but not really sure how much or how often, and not sure yet exactly what all of the details are going to look like, what it's going to feel like to be there when you have to be distant and you can't hug your friends and hang out with them. And you're a business owner and you don't know when the demand is going to pick up again. Hopefully there's some pent-up demand there so that you can get rolling again, but maybe they've moved on to something else. I mean, it's just, there's so much. And sometimes for some of us, and as we get older, maybe you're a senior and you've lost so many of your friends. Maybe your spouse has passed away too. And every day feels like something to endure. Just to get through until it's late enough that it would be okay to go to bed so you can start the next day the same way. Maybe there's a moment in your life where things are frustrating with your parents at home and they're just so annoying and they continue to keep restrictions on you that you do not think are fair. And maybe they are more than you thought of other places. And maybe there's places that you come and inhabit often that aren't opening up the same ways that other people are. And your friend gets to do this and your parents say you're not allowed to do that. Or this other place is doing this, but we're not doing that. And it's hard to just endure. And this is kind of what the people in the Hebrews are doing. And we've talked about this plenty, how they're going through different kinds of problems and difficulties. They've chosen to follow Jesus, and that has alienated them from the Jewish community and from the Gentile community. And they also know that things are going not so well in the Jewish community. There's starting to be rumors of, if not active rebellion against the Romans at this time. The book was probably written close to AD 70. We're not exactly sure when. Now, AD 70 is when Jerusalem was finally overrun and the temple was destroyed. And it would seem that this writer would have mentioned that if it had happened already. But we know it's also one of the later books, so it's somewhere around there. Maybe the rebellion has already happened. Maybe the Romans have already surrounded and encamped themselves around the city of Jerusalem, and they've cut off all of the supplies into that city, and things are going from bad to worse there. Maybe even at that time they've seen some of their family members who were caught after trying to leave Jerusalem, and they were crucified on thousands of crosses that were set up around the city of Jerusalem so that the Romans could show their might and power over these people and say, we are the ones, Caesar is Lord, and you will bow to us. And in the middle of that, the Christians are saying, no, Jesus is Lord. But it's causing them more and more problems. And here the writer is just telling them to endure, to run the race with perseverance. This last section of the book of Hebrews follows on that therefore in Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these ordinary people whom God used to do extraordinary things because they trusted in him, let us then throw off everything that hinders, the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the perfecter and the pioneer of our faith. The writer knows that it is hard at times. So this section is full of encouragement and warnings that we shouldn't walk away from these things. We shouldn't ignore the stories that are here. And these are good warnings for us to hear as well, particularly in this time. I know it's easy in summertime to kind of drift away from our usual practice of church attendance and from doing our own daily devotions, from paying attention to where God is, from being connected to him and his community on a regular basis. And especially now with all of these other restrictions that are going on, it's just so easy to stay at home and maybe watch the service online or maybe not. It's just so easy to kind of lose our focus and to focus on other things, to argue about other things, to pay attention to other things. And the writer says, no, we need to focus on him. It's the only thing that will see us through. And in this section, he reveals a contrast. Now, we've talked lots in this book about how Jesus is better than everything that has come before. And here, as an encouragement, he raises up what he calls two mountains. And the section in the NIV says it's a mountain of fear and a mountain of joy. The mountain of fear starts in verse 18. He says, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched, and that is burning with fire, to darkness, to gloom, and to storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was being commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death," was one of the commands. The sight was so terrifying that even Moses, this one who was so close to God, who had encountered God in the burning bush, who had been sent back to Egypt to set the people free, who had been an instrument of God in all of those plagues and in the release of the people from Egypt, he too was scared. Now, there's so much going on here, and we'll talk about a couple of different interpretations or a couple of different things that this is reflecting on Mount Sinai. But it starts, of course, with Exodus 19. This is the first time that the people of Israel really encounter God there at Mount Sinai. Now, remember, at this point in the story, the people of Israel have already been released from Egypt. They've been brought out of slavery. They've been brought to Mount Sinai, which was a fulfillment of a promise made to Moses. So he knows what's going on here, but the people really don't. And the people have already been promised by God that they will be his people if they follow and trust in him. And the people themselves have already committed as well. I mean, who wouldn't, right? You were a slave in Egypt. Now you've suddenly been set free by this God who does all of these incredible powers, shows he's way more powerful than the biggest military superpower in that time frame. So of course they say, yes, if you want to be our God, yes, we will do anything you say. So then they set aside 3 days to purify themselves, to get themselves ready to meet with this God. And this is how Exodus says it. This is Exodus 19, verses 16 and following. "On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain." Now, I want you to picture this in your mind's eye. If it's easier for you to picture stuff with your eyes closed, then do so. But just picture what this must have been like. You've got hundreds of thousands of people, a mixed multitude. Actually, it's not only Jewish people. There's also some Egyptians and others who had seen the power of God and allied themselves with him. They're all gathering around the base of this mountain, and they're looking up at it. And it's covered with smoke because the Lord Yahweh had descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace. The whole mountain trembled violently as the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. And Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. Here at the base of that mountain, they get a glimpse of the God who has rescued them. And because what they know is that power is used to control through the threat of violence, they are terrified. They see how powerful this God is, and they say, "We do not want to hear from him. We are not worthy, or we are not able to stand in his presence," because they were afraid that they were going to be punished for the ways in which they had failed. This actually is how Moses describes his own fear in Deuteronomy. He says, I trembled with fear before God because I was afraid of him because of the ways in which you had walked away from him. He says he was afraid of God after they had made the golden calf. So if you remember, the people had gone, Moses had gone up to the mountain. He is up there for 40 days. In the meantime, the people were like, we don't know where Moses went. We don't know where this God is. We need something we can see, we can touch, we can feel, something maybe we can manipulate ourselves. So Aaron took the gold from them and made a golden calf, set it up and said, this is your God that led you out of Egypt. And Moses, of course, learned about this. God sent him down and he was angry. He broke the stone tablets and then he went back up and he pleaded with God to forgive them. And Moses says, at that moment, he was terrified because he realized, or he thought, that power leads to control, which leads to punishment when people get out of line. The description of this first mountain brings fear for them. Now, there's also ways in which this story changes and shifts slightly throughout the Old Testament. As God reveals himself to be a forgiving God, a loving God, a God who is patient and kind, a God who says, yes, I'm going to send you into exile because this is not working, you in this land, you just keep going to other places. But then we see in Ezekiel that God actually goes ahead of them into exile and promises to still be with them there and promises to pull them out, to take them out of that as well. What also brings to mind, for me at least, this description, brings to mind the event that happened with Elijah. Now, Elijah also met God on Mount Sinai. You can find that in 1 Kings chapter 19. Now, this story comes on the heels of Elijah's great success against the prophets of Baal. Remember, they were up there on the mountain, and on the mountain, he had said to the prophets, there was over 400 of them, here, we'll make a test. I'll set up an altar, and you set up an altar. You put a bull on it, I believe, and I'll put a bull on it as well. And then we'll see which God is the real God. The God that answers with fire is the real one. The prophets of Baal worked themselves into a frenzy trying to get Baal to respond to them. And Elijah, when they had failed, pours water all over the altar. And then God responds and burns up the altar. And at that moment, the people realize that Baal is wrong. And all the prophets of Baal are killed for leading the people astray. But Elijah, at this moment of which should be kind of success, fears for his life. Because Ahab and Jezebel the queen, who loves and follows Baal, this false god, I don't understand why, but whatever, decides that she will not rest until Elijah is dead. So Elijah runs. He runs into the wilderness. And at one point he falls down and he goes to sleep under a broom tree and he prays that God would just take his life because he can't make it anymore. An angel shows up, gives him some food for the journey and says, here, you need this, then rest. Does this a couple of times. And then Elijah continues his journey in the wilderness and he shows up on Mount Sinai. This is 1 Kings 19 verse 10. The Lord asks Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah replies, I have been very zealous. I've done a lot for you, for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword, and I am the only one left. And now they are trying to kill me too. There's this sense in which, God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what's going on in this world. I don't know why these things are happening. It feels as though I'm the only one here that is actually following you, that is actually doing the things you're asking me to, that actually cares about the people that are around them, that actually wants them to follow and love you. And here it's only gotten me trouble, and now I'm the one that's going to be next. I don't get this. I don't understand what's going on. I think we're there sometimes too. I know I am right now, particularly. I don't know what's going on with all of this. I don't know where God is. Sometimes it seems as though he's silent to my pleas, and he's ignoring my prayers. I mean, COVID is one thing, but then you hear of this bombing in Lebanon where they're still sifting through the ashes to see how many people are dead, and we know that thousands have been injured there. What's going on? The Lord says, "Go and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." This is also something that happened to Moses on Mount Sinai. Then a great and powerful wind tore through the mountains, and they tore them apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, and the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. So here we get an image of God who is the almighty, powerful God. But here to Elijah, he's not showing him as the powerful God that can control him and can make him do things. But he's the gentle God that cares for him. After the fire came a gentle whisper, and when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, and he went out and he stood at the mouth of the cave. And then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he replies again, "I have been very zealous for the Lord. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death, and I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." And the Lord says to him, and this frustrates me, quite honestly, about the way that God interacts with us. He doesn't always answer our questions and our pleas. And these are legitimate pleas and legitimate questions and petitions against God. But God doesn't answer. He says to Elijah, "Go back the way you came." Now remember, this is a gentle whisper as God shows up here. "Go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat from Abel Maholah, to succeed you as prophet." Go back, Elijah, God says. You are not alone. Your work will continue because I am not done, God says. And further, this is verse 18, "I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." You are not alone. Your work is not done because I am not done. So go back, Elijah. I will be with you and I will help you endure the things that you need to endure. He still runs into all kinds of problems later. He still has all kinds of issues later. But you're not alone. And these are the things that are evoked by this description of the first mountain, this mountain with fire and wind and earthquake and trumpets. One of a God that is both almighty powerful and also speaks in a gentle whisper. One who calls us to be his people, who shows us that he can and will do what he has said he is going to do, and the one who quietly encourages us along so that we can persevere, so that we can endure the life that is set before us. But of course, the story doesn't end simply with an encouragement from God to endure. As amazing as that message is, and as amazing as the things it inspired were, right? If we even just stopped there, that could be amazingly inspiring for us. That could help us to do and continue in the ways that God has gone before us, in the ways in which he is calling us. We are not alone. Our work is not done, and God is with us, and he will continue his work through us. That is amazing. But beyond that, the writer of the Hebrews says, there is more, because we no longer approach this mountain of fear. We now approach a mountain of joy, because Mount Sion or Mount Sinai has been replaced with Mount Zion, the mountain of fear and of trembling. This worry that this powerful God is going to crush us if we do not follow him has been replaced with the knowledge that this new revelation of God that has come through in Jesus, where we see exactly who God is, has brought all kinds of freedom for us, because the covenant is renewed in him in a way that it cannot be revoked from us. And so it is a mountain of joy. You can see this in verse 22. You have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, not a mountain that can be touched, that's full of all of these things, but to the heavenly Jerusalem. Not just the Jerusalem that is there in the Holy Land, the one that is maybe at the time of the writers being attacked by the Romans, but a heavenly one. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. You have come to a place where the angels aren't just bringing out messages about how we should live, but they're now telling us joyfully that our lives have real purpose, that we are loved and cherished by God, that we are forgiven for all of the ways that we have fallen short, and that we are given then the power to live the new life that He has calling us to live, that we can love our neighbors as ourselves, that we can love our enemies, that we can disagree with others without saying that they're the worst people in the world, that we can live a life that shows just how incredible God is because of the joy that He brings us. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. You've come to a party. To the church of the firstborn of the dead, that takes away all of the power of those who say that they are powerful, those who claim and make claims on our lives and say, you must obey me or else I will put you to death, or I will make things hard for you. All of that is gone because now Jesus has gone through death to new life, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, to the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect. You have come to a place where you can already taste the completeness that God offers as He comes and lives and dwells within a particular group of people. And those who have gone before you have been made complete. And they are urging you on. They are encouraging you in your race. They are helping you endure whatever it is you need to go through. Exodus led to a place where the people understood that God had a claim on their life. And Mount Zion brings us to a place where we know not only that God has a claim on our life because He is powerful, though that is true, but God has a claim on our life because He loves us, because we are His children, and He wants what's best for us. God has come in Jesus in a much more meaningful and effective way than the way He came to Moses and Elijah. Because through Him we have been invited to a party, to a joyful celebration. And while it might not always seem like that now, and while we wrestle and struggle with the reality of life as we wait for that final time and for the party to come, as we maybe carry our bicycles, knowing that when we get to a place, it will be fixed for us, we can trust that it will be fixed, that it will be good. Yes, sometimes we have to sit and relax and rest because the journey is difficult. Sometimes we scream and we cry out against God because it seems as though He's making the journey difficult. Sometimes there were moments when I was yelling at the top of my lungs for someone to come and help me, and no one did until the time when I got to the place where He could help. Through him, we have been invited to a joyful celebration. And there are times when we simply have to endure, when we simply have to get up and keep moving, putting one foot in front of the other, continuing to reflect on the stories of these people who have come before this hall of faith, who have been and gone through amazing things, who can encourage us and who are cheering us on. Because we are not alone. Our work is not done because God is not done yet.